The great secret of life is the law of assumption. What you assume to be true, though it may be denied by your senses, will harden into fact. And so tonight I want to speak to you about a most marvelous key to transforming your life: to act like a millionaire. When I say act like a millionaire, I do not mean the performance of mere outer gestures, not a vain play of luxury or outward opulence. No, I speak of an inner spiritual act, an assumption, a feeling, an identification of the self with a state, a consciousness that knows I am wealthy, I am abundant, I am free. That is the act I speak of, and it is the only act required to change the circumstances of your life. Man is all imagination, and God is man, and exists in us, and we in him. The eternal body of man is the imagination, and that is God himself. If this be true, and I assure you it is, then you possess within you the power to shape and mold your life into anything you dare to imagine, provided you assume the state to be real. To act like a millionaire is not to chase money. It is to enter into the mood, the tone, the spirit of wealth. A millionaire is not someone who merely has money. They are someone who has accepted a self-concept of abundance. They no longer question whether they can afford something. They no longer dwell on lack. They do not seek validation from others. They do not panic when bills arrive. Why? Because their consciousness is not that of the poor, but of the rich. And it is consciousness that determines your world. You may be in a one-room apartment tonight, sharing it with others. You may have no money in your wallet, no clear direction. But I say to you, if you will assume the feeling of being wealthy, truly feel it, believe it, rest in it, it must become your outer reality. Because the outer world is nothing more than the projection of your inner assumptions. There is no fiction. All things exist. Every state imaginable exists now, eternally, in the divine imagination. The only question is, which state are you occupying? Are you in the state of poverty? Then you will see lack. Are you in the state of limitation? Then the world will mirror it back to you in constraint. But if you dare to act, not in pretense, but in inward conviction, as though you already possess what you desire, the world must rearrange itself to reflect your assumption. You must learn to live inwardly from your goal, not towards it. Most people say, when I have the money, then I'll feel secure. But that is not how the law works. You must feel secure now. Feel the freedom of financial abundance now. Walk in that assumption. Let it permeate your being. Let it guide your actions. Let it define your reactions. Ask yourself tonight, how would I feel if I were already a millionaire? How would I walk? How would I think? How would I carry myself? Where would my attention be? What would I no longer worry about? These questions are not idle fantasy. They are the gateway to transformation. For in answering them and assuming their truth, you change your state, and your state is your destiny. When I was a young man, I had nothing. No fame, no wealth. I was not yet known. But I knew the secret. I would go to sleep each night imagining I was who I longed to be. I did not wait for the world to change. I changed myself. And the world by law reflected that change. You must become the millionaire now. Inwardly. Feel the security now, not tomorrow, not when the paycheck comes, but now. Your imagination is the creative power of the universe, clothed in human form. There is no limit to what you can assume and manifest, save the limit you place upon yourself. It is written, whatsoever ye desire, when ye pray, believe that ye have received it, and ye shall have it. Not believe that you shall receive, it says believe that you have received. That is the law. That is the secret. That is the act of creation. To act like a millionaire is to assume your wealth is already yours. It is to rise in the morning with gratitude in your heart, knowing the supply is limitless. It is to walk through the day with poise, with generosity, with peace. It is to no longer look to others for validation or support, but to rest in the quiet power of your own I am. When you say, I am rich, and feel it, you are not lying. You are speaking the truth of your eternal being. The lie is when you say, I am poor, because your father owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. The lie is in limitation. The truth is in your divine inheritance. The world may mock you for your inner vision. Let them. The outer world is always a lagging reflection of an earlier assumption. What you assume tonight will harden into fact tomorrow. Persist in the assumption that you are wealthy, and soon circumstances will conspire to make it so. You must not waver. Do not look to the evidence of the senses for confirmation. Do not check your bank account to determine whether your assumption is real. The senses lie. The truth is within. The inner state precedes the outer form. Suppose you are in debt. Suppose the bills are high. What do? You do not affirm the debt. You do not speak of the problem. You go into your inner chamber. You close the door, and there in the silence you imagine that every bill is paid. You feel the relief. You feel the ease. You hear the congratulatory voices of friends saying, "You've made it." And when you come out of that meditation, you carry that feeling with you as you would wear a garment. It is not your job to figure out how it will happen. The law will take care of that. Your only work is to remain faithful to the assumption. That is acting like a millionaire, not outer vanity, not reckless spending, but the inner poise of someone who knows who they are. What does a millionaire fear? Nothing. What does a millionaire doubt? Nothing. What does a millionaire expect? Increase, abundance, expansion. Act like that in consciousness. Not just for a minute, not as a ritual, but as your new identity. When doubt creeps in, and it will go back into the silence. Enter the feeling again. For what you feel consistently becomes your fate. Feeling is the secret. The world responds to your feeling, not your words. You may affirm wealth all day long, but if inwardly you feel lack, you will continue to experience lack. Therefore, do not affirm with the lips what you deny in the heart. Let your heart be saturated with the sense of I am rich, I am blessed, I am prosperous. When you act like a millionaire inwardly, the world must conform. New ideas will come. New opportunities will arise. People will be drawn to you, not because you are chasing them, but because you have aligned with a state of being that naturally attracts its own. It is the law of identical harvest. As within, so without. As above, so below. What you sow in consciousness, you reap in the world. You do not need to struggle or strive. You need only to assume. The assumption, once fully accepted, will outpicture itself without effort. You will be led seemingly by chance to the right actions, to the right people, to the right ideas. It is not magic, it is law. Live from the end. Imagine the wish fulfilled, and act not with force, but with conviction, as though it were already true. That is acting like a millionaire. It is not arrogance. It is not fantasy. It is truth spoken before the world sees it. That is faith. Do not wait for conditions to change. You are the cause. You are the operant power. Nothing happens to you. Everything happens through you. Change your inner speech. Change your reactions. Change your self-talk. Speak to yourself in the language of wealth. I always have more than enough. Money flows easily to me. I am blessed beyond measure. Speak it until you believe it. And then speak it because you believe it. And when you look around and see no evidence of change, do not be discouraged. You have planted the seed. The tree does not grow in a day. Be patient, be persistent, be unwavering. The assumption will find its fulfillment. Every state is a garment. You wear it by feeling it. If you persist in the feeling of being a millionaire, the world must mirror that state back to you. It cannot do otherwise. The world is yourself pushed out. All that you behold, though it appears without, is within, in your imagination. Therefore change your imagination, and you change your world. There is nothing to fear, nothing to beg for. You do not have to convince God to bless you. You are already blessed. You are already one with the source of infinite wealth. But you must claim it. You must feel it. You must act like it, now, in the unseen, before it becomes the seen. This is the great secret. To act not according to appearances, but according to your vision. To walk by faith, not by sight. To live not as a beggar hoping for change, but as a king decreeing what shall be. So tonight, dare to assume it. Dare to feel it real. Act like a millionaire, not tomorrow, but now. In thought, in feeling, in imagination. Let that be your new home. And soon the world will say, he is lucky. She is blessed. but you will know the truth. You will know it was no accident, no luck, but law, divine law, operating perfectly. You have within you the power to create worlds. Use it wisely. Use it joyfully. Use it deliberately. Act like a millionaire, because in truth, you already are. As you persist in this inner act, day by day, something begins to shift. Not just around you, but within you. You begin to feel differently. You begin to expect more, not from the world, but from yourself. And in that silent confidence, in that quiet power, there comes a calm knowing. It is done. You see, the greatest wealth is not the balance in your bank account, but the balance in your mind. The wealthy man is not ruled by his possessions, he rules them. He is not afraid of loss, for he knows the source. He does not grasp or hoard, for he trusts in infinite supply. That is what it means to act like a millionaire, not simply to gain things, but to become the kind of being to whom abundance is natural, effortless, unquestioned. This transformation cannot be faked. It must be felt. The feeling of abundance is your passport to that reality. You do not need anyone's permission to assume it. You do not need a loan or a winning lottery ticket. You only need to claim it in consciousness and live from it as though it were the most natural thing in the world. Imagine for a moment walking into a room with the quiet dignity of someone who has nothing to prove. You do not boast. You do not brag. You simply know. You know that whatever you need will be provided. You know that wealth is drawn to you because you are one with it in thought and feeling. You carry this knowing not as arrogance, but as a gentle authority, a spiritual ease that radiates from the core of your being. This is not ego. This is divine remembrance. It is remembering who you truly are, not a limited needy creature hoping for crumbs, but a powerful creative being whose very thoughts shape the universe. When you act like a millionaire, you don't just attract wealth. You embody a frequency that transcends money. You bring grace into situations. You uplift others. You give, not out of obligation, but from overflow. You become a conduit for the abundance of the infinite to bless the world through you. And you begin to notice small changes at first. Someone repays an old debt. A new opportunity appears. An idea comes to you in a flash of insight. The outer world, once so resistant, now starts to comply. Not because you fought it, but because you changed your state. But even before the outer proves it, the inner knows. You walk through the same streets, but everything feels different. Your world is changing because your concept of self has changed. You no longer identify as someone trying to become rich. You are rich, and everything else must rise to match that new assumption. You smile differently. You speak with assurance. You no longer carry the energy of needing anything. People notice. They don't know what changed, but they feel it. And you feel it too, like stepping into a new skin, one you were always meant to wear. Each time the old self tries to rise, the fear, the doubt, the small thinking, you return gently to your inner sanctuary. You say, "No, I remember now. I am no longer that. I am wealthy in mind, in spirit, in every way that matters." You feel the truth of it deep within you, and that feeling becomes your refuge, your power, your center. There is no limit to how far this can take you. The more you assume, the more you receive. The more you feel abundance, the more abundant you become. It becomes a spiral of growth, not driven by greed, but by divine expansion. Life begins to open up in ways you never expected. Doors you didn't even know existed begin to open. With every blessing that flows into your life, your gratitude increases, not because you finally got something, but because you're now fully aware of what has always been yours. The illusion of lack fades away. You see clearly now. Abundance was never about money. It was about identity. And now you have claimed your true identity. You speak less of what you want and more of what you are. You no longer ask, "How will it come?" You simply dwell in the state of, "It is already mine." Your faith has shifted from blind hope to conscious creation. And still, you go deeper. You begin to see that wealth is not just a personal experience, it is a universal one. You become generous with your thoughts, your energy, your love. You begin to lift others into the same awareness that has set you free. You teach them not by preaching, but by being. Your life becomes the proof of the unseen law. You begin to live in a world of abundance, not because the world changed, but because you did. And what once seemed impossible is now ordinary. What once felt far away is now within you. You are no longer becoming wealthy. You are wealth expressing itself through you. The more you accept this, the more effortless life becomes. You don't chase, you attract. You don't beg, you declare. You don't wait, you assume. You don't react, you create. Because to act like a millionaire is not a method, it is an awakening. An awakening to the fact that everything you ever sought outside of yourself was already present within. And now that you know, you will never go back. Because once you have touched the truth, once you have felt it real, once you have seen the power of assumption unfold in your life, there is no turning back. The old identity crumbles. The old fears dissolve. The old struggle fades into the past. In its place stands a new man, a new woman, one who knows who they are, one who lives by inner vision, not outer appearances, one who dares to act in the unseen with unwavering confidence, one who speaks the word and sees it return fulfilled. So continue, friend. Continue in the assumption. Continue in the feeling. Continue in the inner act. And let the world marvel at how you changed without changing anything except your mind. Because once you have made the inner switch, once you have taken residence in the state of wealth, of abundance, of limitless supply, there is no need to convince anyone, no need to shout your success. The evidence will speak for itself, as silently and powerfully as a sunrise dispelling the dark. It does not announce itself with noise or commotion, but its light fills every corner. So too will your world become illuminated by the radiance of your own self-assumption. You begin to feel the subtle changes in the way life responds to you. It feels as if invisible hands are guiding you. You receive ideas you would have never thought of before, ideas that when acted upon open doors and make connections. These are not random. They are the bridges of incident your assumption is building. It is as though life is conspiring in your favor, not because something outside has changed, but because you now dwell in a higher vibration of self-concept. That new state pulls new circumstances into your orbit. And yet as these things unfold, your peace only deepens. For you are not surprised. You are not in awe. You are grateful, yes, but not shocked. Because you expected this. You felt it first. You assumed it before it arrived. You rehearsed these moments in the sacred chamber of your imagination so many times that when they came to pass, they felt familiar. And that is the mark of true creation, not astonishment, but alignment. You begin to notice how easily people respond to you. Conversations flow differently. Business partners trust you more. Opportunities seem to find you. You radiate something that cannot be defined, but cannot be denied. It is the frequency of belief. It is the quiet confidence of someone who no longer questions their worth, who no longer needs to prove themselves to anyone. You act with decisiveness. You walk with intention. You speak with authority, not because you're pretending, but because you've remembered who you are. When you look back at the old you, the one who hesitated, who doubted, who begged, who waited, you do so with compassion, not regret. Because even that version of yourself was necessary. It led you here. It brought you to the threshold of transformation. And now from this new height, you extend your hand not to boast, but to help others rise. For this is what true wealth does. It uplifts. It liberates. It does not isolate. It expands. As this consciousness of wealth becomes your new default, your life becomes less about acquiring and more about expressing. You begin to live, not for survival, but for significance. Your goals expand, not just to possess things, but to create things that uplift humanity. You become a steward of divine abundance, a channel for higher good. You invest in ideas, in people, in visions that bless the many. Even in your quiet moments, you feel the pulse of this new life within you. There is a calmness where there once was anxiety. There is clarity where there once was confusion. You no longer wonder if it's working, you know it is, because you are it. And everything that unfolds in the outer world is simply echoing the truth you've accepted in the inner. You find yourself speaking less of lack, you stop retelling stories of limitation. You no longer rehearse your traumas as identity. You let go of the need to be understood by those still trapped in the illusion of struggle. You no longer seek agreement, you seek alignment. You know now that nothing changes until you do, and now that you have, the entire world seems to respond in kind. You walk into places with a different aura. You may not have the $1 million in hand, but you carry the $1 million mind. And that mind infused with vision, faith, confidence and joy will call forth the material equivalent in time. For the outer always follows the inner. It may come through unexpected channels. It may arrive through subtle sequences, but it will come because it must. The law cannot be broken. Even if delays occur, you are unbothered. Because you are no longer waiting, you are living. You are not postponing joy, not delaying gratitude. You are not measuring your worth by the clock or the calendar. You know that your only job is to remain faithful to the assumption and let the law fulfill it in its own perfect time. Each night before you sleep, you return to that feeling. You imagine again, not as a task, but as a delight. You close your eyes and see yourself living the life of your assumption, not as fantasy, but as fact. You feel the comfort, the ease, the beauty of it all. You fall asleep in the state of the wish fulfilled. And as you do, your subconscious is impressed again. It goes to work, rearranging the patterns of your world to mirror that state. Each morning, you rise not with a sense of striving, but with a sense of unfolding. You move through the day not chasing opportunities, but allowing them. You don't react to circumstances, you respond from vision. You are no longer ruled by what appears to be, you are ruled by what you know to be, and what you know is that you are rich right now, right here, not because of numbers, but because of identity. You have stepped into the higher version of yourself, and now the old ways feel strange, like wearing clothes that no longer fit. You no longer gossip, no longer complain, no longer explain. You live in a state of quiet expectancy. You've become a magnet for the good you once prayed for, not because you demanded it, but because you embodied it. When others ask, how did you do it? You smile, knowing that what they really want is not a method, but a mindset. You tell them what I tell you now, assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Live from the end. Walk in the inner reality of what you desire, and the outer world must conform. Not because you forced it, but because you finally believed it. Because you finally acted, not like someone hoping to be rich, but like someone who already is. This new way of being, this bold inner wealth, will carry you beyond the reach of circumstance, beyond the reach of fear, beyond the reach of doubt. You will not be shaken, because you have built your world on the solid foundation of consciousness. And that is the only place where lasting wealth can begin. You begin to understand that all things flow from within, that nothing truly comes from without, it is always first born in the unseen. Your reality is shaped moment by moment by the images you hold, the feelings you dwell in, and the assumptions you refuse to let go of. And so you guard your inner world with greater vigilance. You no longer entertain thoughts that contradict your vision. You no longer entertain conversations rooted in limitation. You no longer accept the idea that your fate is decided by economy, politics, or other people's opinions. You know better now. You know that your world mirrors your inner state with absolute fidelity. And so you choose to abide in the feeling of wealth, abundance, freedom, and ease. As this becomes your practice, not a ritual you perform, but a state you live from, you find that money comes as a servant, not a master. You no longer chase it, nor are you intimidated by it. You welcome it as a friend, as a reflection, as a tool. You use it wisely, joyfully, and generously. But you are never bound by it. Your wealth becomes an expression of your consciousness, not the cause of it. And that is when true freedom begins. Because now, even if everything were taken from you, you would not be afraid. You would simply create it again. You have found the well within, and no one can take that from you. You begin to walk among others, not as someone superior, but as someone who remembers. Someone who knows that all things are possible to the one who believes. You no longer need evidence, you are the evidence. Your life becomes a living testimony of the power of assumption. You become a witness to your own creative power, and it humbles you. You feel awe, not for the money or the status, but for the beauty of the law that governs it all, the simplicity, the perfection, the harmony. You understand now why you must act like a millionaire, not for vanity, not for show, but because that act is the bridge. That act is the portal. That act is the invitation to a new dimension of life, where all things are already yours. It is not pretending, it is creating. It is not faking, it is faith in motion. And so you keep practicing the presence of your assumption. You keep choosing your thoughts with care. You keep visualizing with clarity, feeling with intensity, living with expectancy. You keep anchoring your identity in the unseen, until the unseen becomes seen, and the invisible becomes tangible. And when it does, you do not boast, you give thanks. You do not point to yourself, you point to the law. Because now you know that this power is not personal, it is universal. And the same way it worked for you, it will work for anyone who dares to believe. So you live each day with deeper joy, deeper peace, deeper purpose. You give freely, because you know you live in a sea of infinite supply. You bless others, because you are no longer threatened by their success. You celebrate, you encourage, you lift, because you are rooted in abundance and no longer in fear. And in this way, your wealth multiplies, not just in your bank account, but in your relationships, your health, your impact. Every part of your life becomes rich, not because you sought riches, but because you became rich in spirit. Every night, when you return again to the silence, you smile. Because now, you don't need to wish, you only need to remember. You don't need to hope, you only need to feel. You don't need to beg. You only need to be. And that is the greatest wealth of all, to live from the truth that you already are what you formerly sought to become. To act, not for appearances, but from awareness. To embody, not to impress, but to express. To know, not from logic, but from experience. That you are one with the source of all things, and in that knowing, you are free. In that freedom, there is no longer a striving, no longer a sense of desperation. You begin to walk in rhythm with the law, in sync with the divine pattern of creation. You feel led, not by circumstance, but by vision. You are no longer tossed by the winds of opinion, nor shaken by the noise of the world. You have found your anchor within. You have found that sacred stillness, where everything is created, not through force, but through faith. Not through effort, but through embodiment. Now every decision you make flows from this identity. You are no longer making choices to become wealthy, you are making choices as one who already is. You think differently, you move differently, you speak differently. Because you are no longer asking for permission to prosper. You have assumed the role. You have accepted the inheritance. You have become what you once merely hoped to be. The world, faithful as it is to your inner stance, begins to offer reflections, mirrors of the state you inhabit. People treat you differently. Opportunities seem drawn to you like iron to a magnet. You sit in meetings with a new sense of composure. You negotiate with assurance, not arrogance. You give generously, knowing that what you give flows from an infinite well. You hold no fear about the future, because you have already seen it, felt it, claimed it. Though others may ask for proof, for facts, for justification of your faith, you give them none. You simply continue to live from the state of your assumption, because you know now that no explanation is required, no validation is necessary. The proof of the assumption is in the unfolding of reality, and you are content to let time reveal what imagination has already secured. You carry yourself with grace. You dress not to impress, but to reflect the image you hold of yourself. You manage your affairs with wisdom, with care, with the stewardship of one who understands that wealth is not a possession, but a trust. You honor what you receive, and in doing so you open yourself to receive more, because the law responds not to what you want, but to who you are being. And being is a choice you make, each moment, not once, but continually. Should a challenge arise, Should a moment of fear or doubt attempt to re-enter, you do not panic. You do not revert. You return. You return to the feeling. You return to the vision. You close your eyes and remember. You feel it again. You speak it again. You walk again. In the end you have already seen. And once again, the outer world yields. Because the outer world has no choice but to yield. It is clay in the hands of the potter. It is blank film awaiting the projection of your internal state. It must obey. It must conform. It cannot do otherwise. For creation is finished. All states exist. And you, by assumption, by feeling, by belief, enter the state of your choosing and call it into experience. And each day, this becomes more natural. Less of an effort, more of a lifestyle. Less of a technique, more of a truth. Until one day, you realize you haven't just been acting like a millionaire. You are a millionaire. Not merely in funds, but in mind, in emotion, in spirit. You are rich in love, in clarity, in purpose. You are prosperous in joy, in connection, in peace. And the world has changed, not because it needed to, but because you did. Then quietly, you begin to wonder, if this law can do this, what else is possible? If I could become this by assumption, what more could I become? What greater heights await the one who is willing to believe? What more lies dormant within me, waiting only for recognition, for permission, for embodiment? And so you do not stop. You do not settle. You expand. You keep going. You dream even bigger dreams, not with a sense of striving, but with the certainty of one who understands the process. And as you move from glory to glory, from vision to vision, from assumption to realization, you know now that there is no limit to what you may experience, only the limits you place on your own imagination. In this beautiful unfolding, in this ever-increasing revelation of who you are and what you contain, you realize at last, this is not about money. It never was. It is about mastery of the self. It is about knowing your true nature. It is about remembering the creative power that you are, the divine principle that breathes through your every thought, your every word, your every feeling. And as that remembrance deepens, you walk as one no longer trying to get somewhere, but as one who has arrived. In that arrival, there is no need for grand declarations or public proclamations. The richness of your being speaks louder than any words could. It emanates from your presence, your calm, your ease, your certainty. People begin to sense it without knowing why. They feel safe around you, uplifted, inspired, not because of anything you say, but because of who you have become. You no longer explain wealth, you embody it. You no longer seek success, you radiate it. You no longer talk about change, you are the change. From this elevated state, you realize that wealth is not just something to attain. It is something to share, to extend, to express. It becomes a way of loving, a way of healing, a way of serving. You use your abundance as a tool to bless others, not to elevate yourself above them, but to remind them of what they too are capable of. You become a mirror, not of ego, but of possibility. You carry the unspoken message. If I could remember, so can you. You give without fear of depletion. You invest without fear of loss. You create without fear of rejection. Because you have seen what is possible when you live from the end, when you dwell in the wish fulfilled, when you act, not for appearance, but from identity. And because of that you trust the law. You trust life. You trust yourself. In trusting yourself, you begin to hear the deeper voice, the still small voice, with more clarity. It guides you gently, not through anxiety or pressure, but through inspiration. You find yourself taking steps you once feared, saying yes to opportunities you once thought were beyond you. Not because you are trying to force something to happen, but because you know it already has. You are simply walking the path your imagination paved. There's no more striving for success in the way the world teaches it. There's no more burnout, no more scarcity mindset hustle. Instead, there is flow, there is receptivity, there is alignment. Because now you move in harmony with your own creation, allowing it to unfold with divine timing and orchestration. You have stopped pushing and started allowing. You have stopped doubting and started declaring. You no longer analyze how it will all come together. You no longer interrogate the process with impatience. You understand that the delay is not denial, that every step is necessary, that every so-called setback is part of the orchestration. You see even the quiet seasons, not as voids, but as fertile fields, rich with unseen activity. As you rest in that faith, the results come faster, with greater elegance. You begin to see things working in ways you never planned, and you laugh, not with surprise, but with recognition. You say, of course, because the outer always confirms the inner. It cannot be otherwise. The seed you planted in imagination has taken root, and its fruit was inevitable. Through it all you stay grounded, not in the world's logic, but in divine law. You live by truth, not trend, by revelation, not reaction. And in that you find peace, not just the peace that comes from having enough, but the peace that comes from knowing who you are. And so you keep walking, not as someone trying to make it, but as someone who already has. Not as someone waiting for proof, but as someone who is the proof. Not as someone hoping for wealth, but as someone who now understands that wealth was always within reach, waiting for you to act like it was already yours. And now it is. And now it is not because the world changed first, but because you did. Not because something external unlocked, but because you unlocked something eternal within yourself. You no longer cling to the idea of becoming. You have entered the experience of being. And from this state of being, all else flows naturally, harmoniously, inevitably. The world bends quietly to your assumption, not with noise or spectacle, but with precision and grace. You move through life, not as a seeker, but as one who has found. You begin to notice the subtle differences in the way you engage with life. You're no longer waiting for validation to feel worthy. You're no longer using effort to try and compensate for inner disbelief. You no longer speak as if your good is distant. Instead, your words carry the calm confidence of fulfillment. You speak as one who has, and because you do, the world echoes back that having, not because the outer gave it to you, but because you drew it out from within. You wore the invisible crown, and now others see it too. Though the path continues, and though life brings new horizons, new expansions, new invitations to rise even higher, you are no longer rattled by change. You welcome it. You move with it. You understand now that everything you desire already exists in consciousness, and that your only task is to dwell in its reality. You no longer need to figure everything out. You simply need to stay faithful to the end you've chosen, and all means necessary will be drawn unto you. This realization sets you free, not only from fear and scarcity, but from the old story entirely. You are no longer the one who struggled, who tried, who begged. You are no longer the one who asked when will it happen. You are now the one who says it is happening. It has happened. It is done. And in that declaration, the reality solidifies. You look at others with compassion, not pity, because you remember what it was like to live in the illusion of lack. You remember what it felt like to believe that things were far away, difficult, impossible. But now you carry within you a gentle invitation, not in preaching, but in presence. You invite others to remember who they are, simply by the way you live. Because when you act like a millionaire, not in ego, but in essence, you call others to rise to their own truth. You have become a demonstration, not of wealth alone, but of the law that governs all things. You are proof that assumption creates reality. You are proof that imagination is the foundation of experience. You are proof that who you are inwardly is the only truth that matters. And now that you know this, you walk differently, not for effect, but from identity. Not to prove anything, but because it's the only way you know how to be. And this new way of being, this calm, clear, unwavering stance, continues to draw more of what matches it. Not as reward, but as reflection. Not as favor, but as fulfillment. And you no longer ask, how much more can I receive? You ask, how much more can I give? Because your storehouse is full, your cup overflows, and you give not to get, but because you know that to give is to multiply, that to release is to receive, that to bless others is to deepen your own wealth. So you continue forward, quietly powerful, peacefully rich, invisibly crowned. You act like a millionaire, not because you want to be one, but because you know that you are. You live from the end, not because it's a strategy, but because it's your nature. And the more you live from that end, the more the beginning transforms to meet it. Everything reshapes, everything reconfigures, everything flows, because you have become the cause. You have returned to the center. You have stepped into the only truth that matters. And from that truth you will never leave again. Because now you understand that this truth is not a momentary experience. It is a permanent foundation. It is not something you visit. It is something you abide in. You no longer dip into the feeling of abundance only during meditation or affirmation. You carry it with you, quietly, constantly, like breath. It becomes your atmosphere. It becomes the very lens through which you see the world. And through that lens, everything glows with potential. Every encounter becomes a divine appointment. Every moment becomes a mirror of your inner wealth. You no longer need to announce your transformation. It announces itself through the fruit it bears. The calm in your voice, the ease in your decisions, the peace in your presence. You walk into rooms and they respond to you, not to your clothes, not to your history, but to your energy. Because consciousness is the only real currency, and yours has become priceless. You start to realize that true wealth was never about how much you had. It was always about how much you recognized. The world is overflowing with abundance, but it will only ever reflect the measure you allow. And now you allow fully. You say yes without resistance. You receive without guilt. You expand without apology. Because you understand the source of all things is within you. And to limit yourself is to deny the very nature of your being. You see the old fears for what they were, ghosts of a former self who didn't yet know their power. You see the old limits as illusions built on second-hand beliefs. And you smile, not with regret, but with gratitude. Because every limitation you've dismantled became a step in your awakening. Every doubt you overcame forged the clarity you now stand in. And every time you dared to feel it real, despite the evidence to the contrary, you drew closer to this moment of effortless being. You no longer measure time the way you used to. You no longer ask, how long will it take? You ask instead, how fully can I feel it now? Because you know that time is not your master. Consciousness is. And the more intensely and completely you dwell in the state of your desire, the more swiftly it must appear. It is law, immutable, impersonal, precise. You begin to notice how easily the world bends to the tone of your inner world. A shift in assumption creates a shift in outcome. A single change in self-concept alters the entire landscape of your life. And because you've seen this again and again, you now use it deliberately. Not just for wealth, but for joy, for love, for purpose, for peace. You become a conscious creator, and everything you touch begins to prosper. Not because of what you do, but because of who you are being while you do it. Even the mundane becomes sacred. Even the routine becomes a ritual of affirmation. Every step you take, every move you make, every breath you breathe says one thing: I am that which I have assumed myself to be. And as you continue to live from this inner truth, you see that everything you once longed for was never outside of you. It was always waiting within, quiet, faithful, ready, awaiting your permission to be expressed. And now that you've given that permission, now that you've said yes with your heart, with your imagination, with your daily feeling, the gates have opened. Life responds with a generosity that leaves no doubt. Synchronicities multiply, resources appear. The perfect people cross your path. Solutions arrive before problems even fully form. Not because you're lucky, but because you're aligned. And still you do not boast. You do not claim specialness. You do not need to, because you know this power is not yours alone. It is the birthright of all. You are simply one who remembered, one who dared to believe in a higher law, one who stepped beyond the senses and trusted the unseen, one who saw the end and lived from it, no matter what the middle looked like. You keep doing this, not as a technique, but as a way of life. Because acting like a millionaire is no longer something you try to do, it's what you naturally are. It's not an act. It's not a mask. It's the quiet unveiling of your truest self. It's the echo of I am through every fiber of your being. It's the union of belief and being, of vision and vibration, of word and world. As this awareness deepens, so does your gratitude, not a forced ritual but a spontaneous overflow of the heart. You wake up thankful, you move through the day with appreciation in your eyes. You rest each night knowing that nothing is missing, nothing is broken, Nothing is delayed. Everything is unfolding in perfect rhythm, as a reflection of the perfect assumption you hold within. Even when challenges arise, as they sometimes do, you meet them not with fear but with clarity. You don't react, you respond. You don't collapse inward, you expand in truth. Because you understand now that everything, even apparent setbacks, are servants of your assumption. They are the raw material from which your chosen reality is constructed. You do not resist them, you interpret them rightly. You see through the lens of the end fulfilled, and so all things, even seeming problems, begin to work for your good. Your imagination becomes your sanctuary. No longer just a place of escape, it is now the control center of your life. You return to it again and again, not out of desperation but out of joy. You sit quietly and feel the fullness of your chosen life, not to make it happen, but to dwell in its reality. You understand that dwelling is creating, and that to persist in the feeling of the wish fulfilled is to invite its inevitable expression. With every repetition of that feeling, the bridge of incidents continues to unfold. You don't manipulate the bridge, you trust it. You don't chase outcomes, you assume them. And so life begins to bring you precisely what your inner state demands. You're no longer trying to manifest, you are manifestation itself. You're no longer hoping, you're knowing. You're no longer rehearsing, you are living the part in full. People begin to notice. They see the glow, the grace, the grounded confidence in your eyes. They feel the presence of someone who is not waiting for the world to give them permission. And some will ask, what changed? And you will say simply, I did. I chose a new state of being. I stopped waiting and started living from the end. And in that simple answer, some will hear their own awakening echo. You realize now that to act like a millionaire is to do more than dress the part or speak with style. It is to radiate inner security, to exude quiet conviction, to move with the ease of someone who knows all things are already theirs. It is to feel no lack, no rush, no competition. It is to become the embodiment of sufficiency. And that state, because it is internal, can never be taken, only expanded. As you continue in that state, money becomes a natural byproduct, not the goal but the echo, not the reward but the reflection. And you see it come with less effort, less strain, less resistance. Not because you've done more but because you've been more. You've aligned, you've harmonized, you've remembered. And so all things must conform. This knowing brings you peace, a peace that passes understanding, a peace rooted not in outer conditions but in inner certainty. And from that peace you create more freely, give more generously, and live more fully. You're no longer operating from fear of not having, you're living from the joy of already being. Every day this awareness expands. Every day you go deeper into the state, not as a task but as a delight. You look around and see that the world is not something to fight or fix, it is something to reflect. And so you change within, again and again, and the world changes with you. As the world continues to shift around you in response to your inner state, you grow more anchored in your understanding. You realize there is nothing to strive for, only something to surrender to. The truth that consciousness is the only reality. You see now that everything you once sought was never outside of you. It was always an expression waiting for permission, waiting for you to drop resistance, waiting for you to embody the assumption fully. And you do again and again with more ease, more grace, more certainty. You stop needing signs. You stop looking for validation. You stop measuring how far you've come or how far you still have to go. You simply rest in the end. You trust the unseen more than the seen. You respond to life not based on what appears but based on what is real in your imagination. And because imagination is the first cause, all appearances must eventually align. That is the rhythm you now live by. You become fluent in the language of assumption. You speak the words of completion, not desire. You carry the tone of the fulfilled one. You are no longer asking, you are declaring. No longer hoping, you are knowing. No longer reaching, you are receiving. And not because of what the world says you are, but because of what you have claimed yourself to be in the secret chambers of your consciousness. You recognize now that wealth is not something you earn, it is something you allow. It is not a goal, it is a state. And that state is yours to dwell in at will. You step into it with imagination, and you remain in it with feeling. It becomes your home. And everything else, money, opportunities, connections, are simply the furnishings being added to reflect the inner atmosphere. Even when doubt knocks at the door, you no longer invite it in. You don't argue with it, you transcend it. Because you know doubt only grows in the absence of assumption. So you assume again, you feel it again, you return to the inner world where your truth lives, and from that place you direct the outer world as a faithful servant of your belief. People around you may still wonder how you're doing what you're doing. They may try to mimic your actions, copy your strategy, trace your steps, but they won't find the secret there. Because it was never in the steps, it was in the state. And that state is invisible. That state is sacred. That state is a private agreement between you and the divine imagination that lives within you. So you carry on, not trying to convince others, not trying to convert them, but simply living the truth. And in your living you become a demonstration, a living proof of the power of assumption, a quiet testimony that wealth is not won by struggle, but revealed by being. And this is not arrogance. It is reverence. Reverence for the law. Reverence for the I am that chose to become you. Reverence for the eternal principle that to him that hath more shall be given. You continue. Each day a new layer of alignment. Each moment a new choice to dwell in the truth. You walk through life not as a seeker but as a finder. Not as someone chasing abundance but as someone revealing it through awareness. Not as someone trying to become but as someone who already is. Because that is the essence of acting like a millionaire, not pretending but remembering. Not performing but embodying. Not striving but assuming. And from that assumption all things follow. And so I say to you now, stop waiting. Stop wishing. Stop seeking validation from a world that only reflects what you assume. The power is already within you. The wealth you desire, the success you dream of, the freedom you long for. It all begins and ends in your imagination. Dare to assume it. Dare to feel it. Dare to live from it. Act like a millionaire. Not because of what's in your bank account, but because of what's in your consciousness. Embody the feeling of already having. Walk, speak and think as one who knows their reality is shaped from within. When you do this consistently, faithfully and without compromise, the world must conform. It has no choice. It is law. You are not here to beg from life. You are here to command it by the authority of your assumption. You are not a victim of circumstances. You are the cause of them. So remember who you are. Remember what you carry. And remember this: you become what you believe. You attract what you assume and you manifest what you are. Live from the end, feel it real and act like it's already done. Because in truth it is. Now go and be who you truly are. A creator, a master, a millionaire in spirit manifesting in form.